station don't have a little notepad to write report. Find a black hole. You cannot have a heart to allow that to happen. Brothers and sisters, but I will deal more with that another time. Tonight, I wanted to raise with you that this government has been in office for 9 years or so. They have wasted and squandered hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And I will show you tonight just one recent example. In the parliament on Friday last, we received a written response to what is called question number 42. Question 42, filed in the name of the Member of Parliament for Orapuch East. We asked the Prime Minister, only for 3 years, we were interested in 3 years, could you tell us what was the cost of your travel? You know this fella just come back to Trinidad to change his clothes and go back. But we were concerned with that because when you do that, you spend money and you spend taxpayers' money. The hospital don't have a tablet. The police station don't have a little notepad to write report. They don't have toilet paper. Everything gone through. The Prime Minister's office sent a letter, a response. In 36 months, Keith Rowley made 19 official visits in 36 months, which is 3 years. Brothers and sisters, I will tell you the summary and then we'll get to the detail. He spent $10.6 million in 3 years in travel. In travel. That works out to $300,000 per month. $300,000 per month Keith Rowley spends on travel in the last 3 years. We ain't going back to 2015 and thing yet. This is where your money went when they don't have basic equipment in ministries, when they cannot provide you with a food card, a hamper. When you come into Lengua, I coming this evening through Lengua, I had to ask the driver, I say, are you sure we on the road? At any time, I thought the thing would have dropped from the ceiling like in them plane, you know, when there's a change of pressure, there has dropped something from the ceiling. I look and I thought in the van it would have dropped. I couldn't believe these roads. You cannot get money to fix roads in these areas, but $10.6 million, and I give you just a couple small examples. Keith Rowley, this one is a nice one. He went to St. Vincent. You all remember in St. Vincent there was a meeting with Maduro, and they called President Irfan Ali, Mr. Maduro and others for a little meeting to discuss their problem. Keith Rowley decided he going to that. Now what he gone there to do, we don't know. But you know, 1 day in St. Vincent cost $75,000. A ticket to St. Vincent is about $3,000. It cost this country $75,000 for a 1 day trip of the Prime Minister to St. Vincent. Brothers and sisters, he went to something called roundtable discussions with a congresswoman discussing banking in Barbados. That meeting was effectively 1 day. 2 day travel, 1 day meeting. It cost the taxpayer $127,000. Here this one, World Leader Summit, taking place in Scotland and London, October 31st to November 6th. If you take away traveling days, 4 days. $1.1 million in 4 days, gone. I continue. Oh, strategic energy briefing session hosted by Proman in Zurich. Then he traveled to Amsterdam. Then he traveled to London. Now he's always traveling with Pat Pastu. Who is the guy from around the world in 80 days? The Qadi. So this money I telling you is for Rowley. It's not for what Anel refers to as what? Yeah, it's not him. This is for Rowley alone because, in fact, I believe with his size, instead of carrying him and buying a seat, you could put him in the overhead compartment and save the taxpayer some money. Just put him in the overhead compartment and he go everywhere. You don't pay for that. So they went to Proman in London and so on. Here is one, September 3rd to 10th. That's 7 days, but you're traveling. Huh? So 5 days, $1.3 million. $1.3 million Keith Rowley spent for that trip. He went to Georgetown. Hear this one. Georgetown, Guyana, February 14th. Valentine's Day. To February 17th. I think I am alive. Huh? So, he went on Valentine's Day to Georgetown. They spent 2 days in Georgetown, $651,000. The classic now, I reached the classic, or should I give you one or two more? More! The crowd say more. He went to London again in December 2nd, my birthday, to December 6th. December 6th to 2nd to 6th, 4 days, but you're traveling, huh? So effectively, it's 3 days you're working. He went in December 2023 to London to see Atlantic LNG by the office. Well, that cost $664,000. That was the cost of that. But here this one, and I'll end this segment because I have to get to two other things here. He went in May 11th to May 17th. Fellow went May 11th to May 17th to receive a Doctor of Letters from Howard University. They decided to give him a Doctor of Letters. That's some personal thing, I think. You call yourself PhD. His friend gave him that, yes. Pretty hard drunk, PhD. So he goes there now, and he gets this PhD, and he then tells us, remember this, we raised this issue in Parliament. He said when he's there, he's going to meet high-level officials. Now, they were running from Starbucks to McDonald's to look for anybody in a jacket and tie and take a picture. That was their idea of high-level officials. They can't tell you who. Once the person wearing a decent suit, a silk tie, and a big towel in the pocket, they meet. So they go on to do that. Do you know it costs the taxpayer $400,000 for Keith Rowley to go to collect his Doctor of Letters from Howard University? That is a personal thing. I don't want to call name and say nothing. We had a case once. The Prime Minister decided that nobody should be traveling to collect any personal, award and so on. Personal awards are good. That is great. We welcome that. But the taxpayer ought not to be paying for that. $400,000 this man spent going for that. We have some more examples. He had a trip between January 29th to February 1st. I don't know how much days it are between January 29th to February 1st. Huh? But he went on a trip with that too. Yeah, there's a trip recorded for that too. Spent over $400,000. Over $400,000, brothers and sisters. That is how they were spending money. That was a meeting of, hear this. We made a big thing out of this too, I remember. A meeting with high-level officials of the United States. January 28th to February 1. How many days are there? I don't know. Anyway, it was $818,000. This, I want to assure you, we will investigate this further. And every one of those trips, we will file questions. We will file freedom of information to find out who did you meet, what was the agenda, who invited you. They just go uninvited everywhere, and then rack up this bill. The other matter I wanted to raise with you, related as well. We have been raising a matter in Parliament. It concerns a lobbying firm in the United States, Washington, called DC LLC. But there's a fellow named Art Collins, who runs it. And since December 2015, they have been paying him per month, I can say it now, 100,000 United States dollars per month. They have paid over 66 million TT dollars, 100,000 US a month in US currency. And you know what his job is? Organize meeting. Who organizes meeting tonight? Will you get 10 US dollars? Huh? 100,000 United States dollars. I have the latest contract in my hand. Another 2 years they have signed between the Ministry of Finance and DC company in America. It is now dated, brothers and sisters, the 24th of January 2024, recently. They signed a 3-year contract from January, again, for 2.7 million United States dollars to be paid 100,000 US per month. Going to a man who does go to New York to say he organizing diaspora. My brother and sister could organize that. Them could organize them kind of meeting and thing. You go on there to pay 100,000, and this is the corruption we face. When we raised this in Parliament, Rowley said, I know him, but he's not working for the PNM. This is how they intend to fund their political campaign. 100,000 US per month. And this is the latest contract, January 2024, for 3 years. But I assure him, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has, what they call that machine where you put paper in a shredder? She has a shredder. And this contract should go in the shredder. We must terminate this nonsense of giving people. We have a mission in the United States, Washington, New York, Miami, and so on. Their job is to promote Trinidad and Tobago. We don't give people $100,000 per month to promote Trinidad and Tobago. This is the indecency. We have asked questions after question in the Parliament. Myself, Mrs. Prasad, and others have asked questions on this. And this is sheer corruption, brothers and sisters. So we have other speakers, of course. We have other issues. All I will do is encourage you at this time to keep firm, keep strong. Your party is a party with a vision, a party that stands for justice, equality, and national unity. We are strong and getting stronger. We won the local government elections, whatever they say we won. We will win the general elections whenever it is called. I ask you, brothers and sisters, do not consume the narrative of the PNM and vomit out their rhetoric. Do not consume their narrative and vomit their rhetoric. That is not your role. That is not your role. You are to be strong and united and recognize that we are now within touching distance of government. We need 2 more seats, and we have them, and we have more in the bag, and we will not be distracted. Thank you. God bless you.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has chastised the opposition and the media for making a scandal out of the Prime Minister's travel delegation over the past few years. Speaking at a post-cabinet media conference on Thursday, he said the 19 trips by the delegations at a cost of $10 million was significantly less than that of the previous People's Partnership government. But more so, he argued that all of his trips were essential in furthering Trinidad and Tobago, noting that he's the #1 salesman for this country.
I could tell you now, without fear of contradiction, throughout my tenure as Prime Minister, no delegation cost $2 million. None. And then there was another one to India in 2012. One delegation to India, led by the Prime Minister, cost $12 million. I didn't see any banner headline in this country about scandal then.
Dr. Rowley said all of his visits have been quite beneficial to this country, including those dealings with the United States, a trip to Australia that led to the purchase of Cape-class vessels, and several others that led to agreements in the energy sector.
Every single time it was opportune, when I come back from one of these trips, I talk to the country sometime from Piaco Airport, telling you where I've been and what I've done and how it benefits you. But in today's world of lies as fashionable, right? They want to tell you anything they want to tell you, hoping that that is the conversation that will become the moving force in the country. So all of a sudden, Prime Minister's travel of $10 million. If I have to invest $10 million in travel to get $17 billion, I'll do it every day.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has chastised the opposition and the media for making a scandal out of the Prime Minister's travel delegation over the past few years. Speaking at a post-cabinet media conference on Thursday, he said the 19 trips by the delegations at a cost of $10 million was significantly less than that of the previous People's Partnership government. But more so, he argued that all of his trips were essential in furthering Trinidad and Tobago, noting that he's the #1 salesman for this country.
I could tell you now, without fear of contradiction, throughout my tenure as Prime Minister, no delegation cost $2 million. None. And then there was another one to India in 2012. One delegation to India, led by the Prime Minister, cost $12 million. I didn't see any banner headline in this country about scandal then.
Dr. Rowley said all of his visits have been quite beneficial to this country, including those dealings with the United States, a trip to Australia that led to the purchase of Cape-class vessels, and several others that led to agreements in the energy sector.
Every single time it was opportune, when I come back from one of these trips, I talk to the country sometime from Piaco Airport, telling you where I've been and what I've done and how it benefits you. But in today's world of lies as fashionable, right? They want to tell you anything they want to tell you, hoping that that is the conversation that will become the moving force in the country. So all of a sudden, Prime Minister's travel of $10 million. If I have to invest $10 million in travel to get $17 billion, I'll do it every day. You would have a few questions for me, but I have a couple of things that I would like to raise first for the public benefit. It is indeed a very sad time for us. The issue in front of us at this precise moment is trying to get to the bottom of what has happened to some of our youngest citizens at the Port of Spain General Hospital. I want to repeat what I said yesterday, that something very wrong appears to have happened there. The outcome is death to these young babies and the consequential pain to the families and to the nation. And we are relying on an independent professional investigation from PAHO. I can report to you now that PAHO has identified 3 persons who will be their team to Trinidad and Tobago. They expect to mobilize these people and be here in a few days before the end of this month, or by the end of this month. This is the deadline they're working with. In the meantime, the hospital is doing everything possible to eliminate the threat and the danger posed in the relevant ward, but the investigations into what has happened would be done by examining the records, procedures and protocols in the hospital to determine what the causes were and what recommendations and liabilities exist on that matter. Then, ladies and gentlemen, I spoke at a press conference not too long ago indicating that one of the assignments of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, which is formed from a political party, as you know, in this era, is to ensure that the population is fed accurate information, failing which it is quite expected at this time that misinformation, outright lies and malice could be fed to the population under the guise of public information. I don't really enjoy spending my time trying to rectify and to produce rebuttals. But I have to do it, because if it is not done as part of my duty, the population will be fed misinformation. They would be guided by agendas which are not. I had chosen as Prime Minister to have gone to the gas exporting countries conference in Qatar. But when it is made out as though the numbers are scandalous, the facts need to be put to the population so that the population is not misled by outright misrepresentation, deliberate misrepresentation. It was said that over a period of almost 4 years, 19 trips made by delegations led by the Prime Minister, that those 19 trips cost $10 million. I want you to remember that. That is a fact established. But what the population needs to know is that that is a significant improvement on the reduction in travel costs for prime ministerial delegations going abroad. But before I go there, I want you all to cast your mind back to when, as Prime Minister, I was castigated in the Parliament by the very same people who are raising this now for not going to COP meetings, not going to UN gatherings in New York. I could tell you, during the last term before 2020, I went to the UN once in 2019. I went to the UN just before COVID, and since then, in this term, I went once. So this figure of 10 million would have been considerably higher if I had gone to these meetings. Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the last one I did not attend. That was in Kigali, in Rwanda. That would have been another serious cost. Dr. Brown represented Trinidad and Tobago. You will recall in the Parliament when I did not attend the first Guyana Energy Conference. I was accused of all manner of evil for not having gone to Guyana, as if I chose not to go to Guyana. In fact, it was said that I had no good relations with the government of Guyana and that I was supporting the government of Granger. All that was said in the Parliament in Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, what had happened, I had chosen as Prime Minister to have gone to the gas exporting countries conference in Qatar because there were issues arising out of the Glasgow meeting where gas exporting countries were coming under attack and proposals were being put forward for banks to stop funding the exploitation of hydrocarbons. Trinidad and Tobago chose to go to the gas exporting meeting to put our position there. And of course, you know, I spoke to you about that already. And of course, other persons went to the Guyana meeting. And since then, I have participated in, I think, 2 or all the Guyana energy conferences, and they've been very valuable to us. So I am not a Prime Minister who traveling for travel's sake. I indicated to this country that I am the country's #1 salesman, and I led from the front in renegotiating and opening terms of contracts that were extremely important to Trinidad and Tobago. So as a result of that, you would have seen in those 19 meetings a number of very important delegations led from Trinidad and Tobago, led by the Prime Minister, to specific instances of activities abroad. So here it is, 10 million for 19 delegations, and that is scandalous. One delegation in a previous government, 2011, one delegation to Australia cost then, and at that time, prices keep going up, right? I'm talking about 2011. If that same delegation is traveling today, the cost would be about a third higher because general costs have gone up in that way. But at that time, that prime ministerial delegation, one, cost $2.6 million. Bear in mind, the scandalous one that you're dealing with now, raised by these same people, One delegation then was $2.6 million. I could tell you now without fear of contradiction. Throughout my tenure as Prime Minister, no delegation cost $2 million. None. And then there was another one to India in 2012. One delegation to India led by the Prime Minister cost $12 million. I didn't see any banner headline in this country about scandal then. A scandal, 19 delegations for $10 million over a 4-year period is no scandal. But when one delegation cost $12 million, the scandal that was raised then, you know what it was? It was the minister speaking to the parliament and lying to the parliament that it was cost $8 million. Look at it, that was published Express, the same paper that carries the banner headline about scandal for my 19 delegations at $10 million. Would go back there and you will find in May 7, 2012, a story about a minister of the then government telling the parliament that it cost $8 million. When I was telling the country it was $12 million because they had misrepresented the amount. And that $12 million, right, was spread across the government, not just the Prime Minister's office. There were other ministries that were spending money on that delegation, and I'll come back to that. You see, one of the things I did when I became Prime Minister was to reduce the size of government, the cabinet. This cabinet is far smaller. 23 members, the last cabinet had about 10 more. So I operate a much smaller cabinet. That is a significant reduction in cost. $40 million a year, right? By reducing the number of members in the cabinet. And of course, if you look at delegations then and delegations now, you will see, if I look at the delegation to India in 2012, you will see there's a Prime Minister, and you will see traveling first class, which is the most expensive ticket you can get. But that is part of the protocol. But then, after the Prime Minister, you see the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister also traveling first class. I could tell you, without fear of contradiction, the permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister has never traveled with me as part of any delegation, because there was never any requirement. Then you see a special advisor to the Prime Minister, then. He's now in the Parliament, calling scandal on my travel. You'll see a certain Shem Baldiusing, special advisor to the Prime Minister. He's hiding somewhere. Australia, I'm told? Yeah. You'll see a certain captain traveling first class. You will see a certain other member, Padarat, advisor to the Prime Minister. He's there too. You will see an advisor on public engagement. You will see a Mrs. Vidwati Newton, not a public officer, traveling on first class with the Prime Minister. You will see a research assistant to the Prime Minister then, a personal assistant to the Prime Minister, and a photographer. None of these categories of people travel with me when I travel leading delegations out of this country. And that is why one delegation here could cost $2.8 million from the Prime Minister office, and across the government, $12 million. And of course, if you go to the other one from Australia, you will see the same set of people, off with the Prime Minister, $2.6 million. And I repeat, no delegation led by me has ever cost $2 million. And if I am to repeat the basis on which I made most of the expensive trips, it had to do with holding important meetings with people who do business with Trinidad and Tobago, identifiable people, and we negotiated from identifiable situations with outcomes that are identifiable, arising from a series of meetings that I have had. You would have heard from different ministers, finance and energy, that we have been able to recover approximately $18 billion more than we would have had if we had just let the contracts slide as written. And these negotiations are not just, hello, how are you doing? They are tough negotiations from people who don't want to pay to you, and you want to ensure that they change their minds. So it usually takes a series of meetings. One particular meeting that I had to lead a delegation to was in Melbourne, in Australia. I visited Australia at the invitation of the Australian government for an official visit. I took the opportunity to meet with the head of BHP, who was just about to sell out their interests to the new company, the one to Woodside. But BHP was sitting on an oil field here in the country, which was not producing any oil because the investment was not being sanctioned. My visit to Australia resulted in that field, Ruby, being sanctioned and triggered a $500 million investment in that field. It's now an oil-producing field. That same visit to Australia, we were able to tap into an Australian funding mechanism for military equipment. We were the first country to have tapped into it. Out of it came our two Cape-class vessels, CG-41 and CG-42. And, of course, we were able to negotiate and introduce the purchase of the two new ferries, the Buku Reef and the APT James, funded from Australian credit arrangements. So those were actual benefits of a delegation led by a Prime Minister to Australia for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And if I go to my visits to the United States, every single one of those visits was a continuation of me engaged either with Trinidad and Tobago issues or CARICOM issues. You may recall that Trinidad and Tobago was head of CARICOM during the COVID period. Arising out of that, we had some significant business. One of it was to deal with this business of de-risking of our banks. I see one particular member of parliament speaking disparagingly when they mentioned the name of Maxine Waters. But let me just say something to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. If there was one honorary parliamentarian representing the Caribbean, meaning Trinidad and Tobago and our colleagues in CARICOM, it was Maxine Waters of California. Because she chaired the Bank and Finance Committee of the United States Congress. And she was instrumental in ensuring that we were not brutalized by the international, meaning American banking community, who were busy de-risking themselves by removing Caribbean banks from the American banking system. And if you would want to know what that means, go and ask Belize. Go and ask Belize how they conduct business when their bank has been removed from the international corresponding banking arrangement. It means that you can't send money anywhere, and they won't do nobody could send money to you in the way you've been accustomed to. And that doing normal trade of letters of credit and so on, you don't have access to the banking system to do the credit as is required to conduct that trade. That is what we were facing. Maxine Waters took on the issue on our exhortation, going to office, making a case, not in one office, but in many offices in Washington. It resulted in congressional hearings in Washington. I represented CARICOM alongside the Prime Minister of Barbados, speaking for CARICOM to the American Parliamentary Committee, who stood with us. And that issue, while it has not gone away, right, the effect of it has been minimized and has receded. But it still is a threat that we face, so we continue. One of the other visits had to do with me going to the Summit of the Americas. I could tell you the CARICOM participation in that summit took place, as you would have seen it took place, only because Trinidad and Tobago led from the front. The special advisor of the American president, Christopher Dodd, came to Trinidad and Tobago to work with us to ensure that CARICOM did not boycott that meeting. Trinidad and Tobago prevented that from happening. And when we got to Washington, it wasn't to Los Angeles, it wasn't business as usual. It was with CARICOM saying to the United States that the time has come for the United States to work more closely with CARICOM on 3 special issues. One was national security, the other was finance, and the other was agriculture. Today, arising out of that arrangement, directed by the American president, we have 3 committees operating, chaired by the vice president and co-chaired by 3 CARICOM prime ministers. I am one of those prime ministers. Right? As a result of that, we've had Maxine Waters come into Barbados, meeting with CARICOM leaders in Barbados. We've had meetings in Washington at Blair House of CARICOM leaders meeting with the American vice president. I can tell you without contradiction, the arrangement and the relationship between the United States and CARICOM has never been better and more direct than it is today. We have access now to decision makers, because one of the things I told you here in this country when I embarked upon this approach of leading our country to renegotiate our own contracts is that I will go not to the office in Port of Spain and give any message to anybody to go anywhere, because the nature of these businesses require me going to where the decisions are made by the decision makers. And that is why I have been to The Hague, I've been to Houston, I've been to Washington, I've been to London, and I've been to Melbourne. That is where the board meetings are held, where the decision makers make the decision, and I don't go through, as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, I don't go through and rely only on those we talk to here in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why we have been able, in one of the visits that they're talking here about, is a visit to London, to sign with oil companies the restructuring of the LNG business in Trinidad and Tobago. But they talk from both sides of the mouth, you know. When we said we will stay holding on to Train 1, they ridiculed us in the worst possible way. You in the media carry be the echo chamber for all the foolishness about how much money we waste, about 400 million we waste on Train 1, and we said, first, that they lied. It wasn't 400 million, it was $34 million US. And we held on to Train 1 to remain at the table to negotiate the future of Trains 2 and Trains 3. Because we only had shareholding in Train 4 now with the closure of Train 1. That was successfully done. And today we have shareholding negotiated after a series of meetings in these capitals with these members who make decisions abroad. We now who have a shareholding in Train 2, Trains 3, and Train 4. Also, look at the price of gas today. It's $1.60. Henry Hub. That is where our contracts were anchored. That is where our earnings were anchored. This government in 2015, knowing a bit more than most of them who opening them out and talking now and writing editorials, we knew that that was disaster for Trinidad and Tobago if we did not get unhinged from that. And we took the decision to hit the road and go to the decision makers and said that Trinidad and Tobago will not accept that position. And we talk about fairness and we talk about who the shareholders are. And you would have heard me saying, not only here in Trinidad and Tobago.
Facts. We were denied the opportunity to present our arguments. In law, the tribunal be voted in favor of the motion has had the constitutional function to find facts. That's what the tribunal we were seeking. Here, aunts, uncles, grandparents, every person is traumatized. Babies are a joy to an entire family. Everyone looks forward to a newborn baby in a family. What is even more heartbreaking is the pain and suffering of these parents of these babies. If we look at newspaper headlines, Express again, Thursday, April 18th, just yesterday, April 18, 2024. 2 sets of twins die. 2 sets of parents lost twins. 2 sets of families lost not 1 but 2 babies each in this debacle, this fiasco, this scandal. Mothers and families are now enduring emotional and mental trauma as a result. Let's look at the Guardian headline on Thursday, April 18, yesterday, 2024. Mother of NICU baby struggles to get out of bed after the death of the baby. The article says, and I quote, during an emotional interview with Guardian Media yesterday, 21-year-old Danielle Samaru said the death of her baby is so overwhelming she finds it hard to even get out of bed most days. The article continues, I keep quoting, every day is getting progressively worse for me. Just the thought of her not being there, not being around, it has been challenging and overwhelming. It is hard to make it out of bed some days. We have her blanket that she would have left in the NICU. I have it with, and I sleep with it. Every night, it is so hard to let go of things, she said as she wept in that Guardian article. End of quote there. Further, we now have a situation where expectant mothers and parents are traumatized at the thought of delivering their babies at that hospital. The Guardian headline again yesterday, Thursday, April 18, 2024. Expectant moms at Port of Spain General Hospital. I can't afford to lose my child and take that easy. Guardian yesterday. The depression and the suffering of these families derail these parents' lives and destroy families. Today, I am calling on the Minister of Health to immediately provide free and professional psychological counseling for these affected parents. They need counseling. Also, they must provide immediate monetary compensation for any work lost or losses that these traumatized families have suffered in the immediate and, of course, in the short term. It is the least the government can do for them at this time. Let's talk about the probe being proposed. What is even more appalling but not surprising is the response of Prime Minister Rowley. I note he's promising an immediate investigation into this national tragedy and scandal. He has also promised PAHO will do an independent probe. We all know that this is just another pappy show. Every time something happens in this country, you set up a probe, you set up a commission, you do an inquiry, and then what happens? We never see the reports. There's so many. We remember the roadmap to recovery, the Paria diving issue, the deaths of those divers. So yes, okay, nothing is done after. We all know that even if this probe is done, report handed in, they will refuse to do anything about it when we look at their track record. Remember in the COVID times, I mean really dangerous times for us, there was a Simongal report, the 2022 Simongal report into the COVID mismanagement. To date, that report is still collecting dust while patients continue to die from COVID up to this day. Even the Nursing Association recognized this is just another sham probe call in yesterday's Express. A Guardian report yesterday states, and I quote, the PM trained his guns on healthcare workers who did not take their jobs seriously. Typical Prime Minister Rowley. Blame game, always blaming everybody else except him and his officials and the persons he appointed to be in charge of these matters. The Prime Minister also chastised those who attempted to politicize the tragedy, amid calls from the UNC for the Minister of Health, Terence Yalsing, to be fired. This matter was first raised in a press conference by us from Dr. Bodo when he had made that call then. So they believe that when we speak about this issue, we are being political about it. Nothing is further from the truth. We have first Prime Minister Rowley's expected blame game on the healthcare workers. And as I say, no one is surprised. This is his trademark admission of failure, blaming everyone when they fall down on the job, when he and his team are the ones falling down on the job. Shameless, unconscionable. Rowley's attack on the UNC for political statements, but in response to Prime Minister Rowley's comments about the so-called politicization of the situation, I want to say this today. Your health minister was appointed by you. The boards and managers of the RHAs, they also ultimately have been appointed by you, and they are the ones who are responsible for this national tragedy. They're state employees appointed by you. Remember that, all these RHA boards, your Minister of Health, they have been handpicked and appointed by you. So don't come to blame the ordinary nurses on the job in the hospitals. They are paid by taxpayers' dollars to do an independent job in the best public interest, which is literally a matter of life or death of citizens. All public sector employees are legally and constitutionally accountable to the public they serve. The Rowley government, especially since their decisions are costing citizens their lives. Own up, you're costing newborn babies their lives. When people are paid by taxpayers to do an independent job in the public interest, they must be held accountable. So what I'm saying, when me or any other member of the opposition, when we call on the government to account for what their failed, dismal, deadly, incompetent performances in these jobs, because newborn babies are dying in our hospitals, and it's an attack on them, and there's nothing short of typical PNM lies, propaganda, and gaslighting. The opposition UNC has a constitutional duty to represent interests, safety, welfare, and rights of all citizens. When 11 newborn babes lost their lives due to a failing health system, it is the duty of the loyal opposition of this country to speak up and to draw these matters to the attention of the public. We can look at their failure, deadly failure, in the health sector. Newsday article yesterday again, and I quote from it, quotes PM Rowley as saying, "Health has always been a priority for this government." What a laughable statement. Health has always been a priority for this government. They tell us we have the best healthcare in the world, but every time one of them falls sick, where do they do? What do? They travel abroad. They go abroad. Prime Minister Rowley had told us he had to go on his vacation, and sometime thereafter he'll be going for his medical checkup. So what's wrong with the doctors here? So you have this great health system, as I say, laughable, and as usual, the hypocrisy of this government. The fact is that over the past 8 years of the Rowley regime and the Minister of Death, Terence Lial Singh, their disastrous reign in this looking after our healthcare, citizens have been entering hospitals, as I said before, as patients. They come out dead, corpses, because of the improper and inadequate healthcare they receive. Many families have had to suffer the immense pain of losing loved ones in the very place that is supposed to cure them. This is not only heartbreaking, but frankly it is inhumane. Every year their budgets are consistently filled with failed and rehashed promises of yesteryear. No tangible measures to improve the quality of healthcare. The facts indicate this is the worst healthcare system in decades. For the past 8 years, almost going on 9 years with this administration, our nation's hospital, especially at San Fernando, Mount Hope, Port of Spain, which service hundreds of thousands of citizens, have been turned into virtual killing fields. Why? There is a chronic lack of medication. Why? There are shortages of CPAP medical items, severely affecting the elderly. Insufficient nursing and senior medical staff. Remember, they shut down that nursing academy we had built somewhere to train our nurses, right in El Dorado. I remember going there, opening it. All our young people being trained for jobs in the medical field. They shut it down. I don't know what. I think it's just closed now. I asked Khadija and her team to visit at El Dorado area, and it's just shut down. No care for training. Shortages of surgical supplies. Lack of operating theatre time and space for surgeries. Severe overcrowding at the accident and emergency departments. I am told often up to 60 critically ill patients are hoarded like animals in a pen, waiting for a bed in a ward, sometimes for up to 3 days. Many die on chairs, trolleys, or on the floor while waiting urgent medical care and attention. It is a national horror story, our healthcare system. outrageous and even criminal for a public health sector, receives massive amounts of money, a huge chunk of taxpayers' money in the budget every year, approximately $7 billion every year since 2016, which totals, if we counted 8 years, that means what, $56 billion in our healthcare system in the last 8 years. So what led to this tragedy that we're talking about, this horrific national crisis? Now, I have here with me, as I said, two very senior doctors, experienced gynecologists and medical doctors in Trinidad, Dr. Gopi Singh, Dr. Bodo. They have informed me of the following issues which would have possibly avoided this horrific national tragedy of 11 babies. 1. Each RHA, which has a neonatal intensive care unit, must have a protocol manual easily available for all staff and personnel to adhere to. Did this happen? Did they? Detection, isolation, and sanitation, and they vigil. As soon as a baby gets sick, they must be isolated. The baby must be isolated. Sanitization and cleaning must be done by trained personnel in the neonatal sanitation. There ought to be a number of seminars conducted for the staff, NICU staff, and personnel, and these should include training to detect early infection. You don't wait till 7 there and it moves up to 11 and we don't know how many more. There must be a fully trained infection control nurse for every NICU. That nurse must be in control of swabbing, culture, sensitivity, testing, cleaning. There must be strict adherence to the protocols established in the protocol manual. There must be protocol manuals in every one of the NICU, formulated by senior medical personnel over a period of time. They must be using as well WHO protocol guidelines. There must be adequate antiseptic cleaning solutions for cleaning of tubings, the ventilators, all equipment in the NICU. Now, we've heard over and over again of a lack of supplies, a lack of equipment in all our institutions. In addition, there must be proper surveillance for early detection. There must be adequate staffing, nurses and doctors for NICU per neonate. There must be an adverse event algorithm and reporting system in a timely and caring manner. Don't wait till 7 people die, babies die. The relevant staff must detect if there is a trend in emerging infections and what could be contributing to this trend. So when one baby died, okay, radar went up, eyes open wide. When it hits 2 and then 3, I mean, what happened? Nothing happened until they express expose, nothing happened. So in essence, it is prevention, early detection, surveillance, sanitation, supplies of antibiotics and staff to the neonate ratio. Therefore, this is a case of acute surveillance and management by the RHA to provide adequate nurses to neonate ratio, an adequate ratio per neonate, infection control nurse, doctor to neonate ratio, adequate supplies for cleaning and for treatment of infection, isolation areas in the NICU, and adequate spacing of neonates while they are being managed, adherence to strict protocols or protocol manuals, and all of this is the responsibility of the board and management of the RHAs, Chief Operation Officer, Chief Executive Officer, a medical chief of staff, a nurse in charge. Such a situation would have been caused by a lack of intense management, because this is critical in areas like these for saving lives. I mentioned already the closure of the El Dorado Nursing School. That contributed to this tragedy. Neonatal mortality decreased significantly under the government island. NICU is a resource-intensive area, and we had more NICU facilities in the Couva Children's Hospital, showing our commitment to this very, very vital area. So today we call for the immediate firing of the Minister of Death, Terence Yasing, the immediate firing of the entire board, CEO and CMOH of the Port of Spain General Hospital, CEO and Chief Medical Officer of that institution. Why? Because they sat down and new babies were dying at a higher rate than usual and did absolutely nothing to prevent the other 7 or 8 or 9 babies dying from infection. That is unpardonable and points to serious, possibly criminal negligence. An urgent statement from the health minister as to what precautionary measures are now being implemented to prevent a recurrence of this widespread infection which caused the death of these babies. What have you done? What have you put in place to avoid such a horror occurring again? We want to know whether there was adherence to the protocols in the NICU. And were they followed or were they ever used in the first place when the staff realized infections were coming down? We call for information regarding the medical and equipment supplies in an NICU. We want to know whether there has been isolation areas within the unit to prevent infected babies from infecting the other babies. Is there adequate medical and nursing professional staff and neonatologists? How you pronounce this up? Doctors who look after the neonates. We must have those professional staff to prevent a recurrence of this. How does this compare to international best practice standards? Whether there has been adequate sterilization and cleaning in the NICU now. Whether there's enough supply and equipment to be used in the management of the preterm neonates. We want an immediate investigation. Look, we bring in power, fine. But why don't we use local experts, because we have them, into this so that corrective measures can be taken, and from the information gathered we can take steps to prevent a recurrence of this. Now I am told that get power involved, which is a very good thing to do, that it will take a long time, and then protocols will have to be established and so on, so that at the end of the day that report may come so late. I mean, even with the barrier divers up to today, you have a report, nothing being done about. So you must tell the country whether they have done any cleansing and sanitation. No. Is it ongoing with expectant mothers? We call for urgent report from the Chief Medical Officer of the hospital and CEO of the RHA and ask what protocols they are now doing to establish, as I say, to prevent a recurrence, because mothers are delivering babies at that hospital. The Minister of Health must tell the country whether now there is a necessity for closing down that unit, that NICU in Port of Spain, at the Port of Spain Hospital. Now I come to the crux of the issue, and what could have prevented this absolute horrendous nightmare, worse than a nightmare. It is a fact that by its deliberate, malicious, vindictive, dangerous, and now deadly refusal to open the Couva Children's Hospital, which was built by the government I led, we are now seeing a situation where the health sector has been transformed into a place of horror where newborn babies are dying. The Couva Hospital, that fiasco will remain forever a testament to this government's malicious, vicious, anti-people nature, a symbol of their destruction of our nation. When I became Prime Minister in 2010, a major challenge was to fix the seriously failing health sector, under which mothers would die, often in childbirth, and that was something I know Dr. Bodo worked very strongly on with the Southwest Regional Health Authority, our then Minister of Health, Dr. Khan. And that hospital in Couva was a tool, an instrument to my administration's health sector reform. It was a state-of-the-art institution, it still is, strategically located to buffer overcrowding at both San Fernando and Mount Hope hospitals. It was supposed to specialize in medical care for children and house a much-needed burns unit for Central Trinidad. As you know, we have the Point Lisa's development, so it does have the burns unit there that access could be had to from any industrial accidents in Point Lisa's. That hospital would have created hundreds of jobs for healthcare and other professionals. And ultimately, the plan was to open that hospital for medical tourism. We would have had state-of-the-art hospital right here in TNT, that others from the Caribbean region, the CARICOM, they could access that healthcare here in Trinidad. So that was an engine driver on its own. It was a great innovation for the health sector, but would also, as I said, created jobs and brought in forex through the medical tourism. And that's to say 8 years later on, none of that has happened. Absolutely none of that has happened. Since 2018, the failed Rowley government has blatantly refused to open it because of sheer envy and vindictiveness. Initially, the Minister of Death, Dialsing, claimed there were insufficient doctors to open a hospital. That is totally not true. They lied. To date, I am told there are over 300 young qualified local doctors, and there are also hundreds of nurses who are still waiting on jobs. So that was then. In 2015 as well, Prime Minister Rowley appointed the infamous Welsh Committee and said he was waiting on them to give recommendations on what to do with the Couva Children's Hospital. That report is still gathering dust on some shelf somewhere in his office. That Welsh report took 2 years to be completed, and as I say, is collecting dust on some shelf in somebody's office. That report recommended that the government get a partner to co-operate the hospital, but the government couldn't get a partner. Indeed, why no one wants to work with this corrupt, incompetent Rowley government. 4 years later, moving along, Minister Dialsing in 2019 came out to say that an offshore medical school be facilitated there, and that UWI had a 51% share in this Couva hospital. We look at an article in the Trinidad Express. I'll give you the date in a moment here, but this article talked about no longer the Children's Hospital. So they changed the name. They've changed the name. And a rose by any other name is still a rose. It's just a name change. I said there's another name change. Maybe you'll ask me about it, and then I'll give you my comments on that other name change. So 8 years later, there is no offshore medical school, no offshore medical school. That Express article, I believe, was in May 16, 2019. Now, 8 years later, no offshore medical school, no medical school. It was during the COVID-19 pandemic when they killed over 4,000 citizens with mismanagement that the Dialsing opened the Couva Children's Hospital to do what? COVID. It took a pandemic to open that state-of-the-art hospital, which is still there standing. And I wonder if you recall when we were building that, when we started the building, they said it was an earthquake.
OFAC, Office of Foreign
up to today, how many years
will come and
later,
talk and elaborate and give a discourse on that aspect of what is happening, especially in our neonatal units throughout the health sector in Trinidad and Tobago. On Saturday the 13th April, on Friday, let me start back on Friday the 12th of 2024 in Parliament, what was laid by the government was the EBC, the Election and Boundaries Commission report, was laid in Parliament, where the renaming of 5 constituencies were done by the EBC. And one of the 5 constituencies, one of the 5 affected myself as a member of Parliament, Pointe-a-Pierre, where for years, ever since everyone knows it as Pointe-a-Pierre, as the constituency of Pointe-a-Pierre. And in that EBC report, one of the 5 name changes for boundaries was Pointe-a-Pierre, where the EBC has now recommended to change to Claxton Bay. And I have given throughout the week, I have been interviewed by the media about this name change, and again in the media today. One of the dailies, it says, Pointe-a-Pierre MP, why not rename it? If you want to keep it to Claxton Bay and want to rename it from Pointe-a-Pierre, why not have Claxton Bay / Marabella as the new name change, in keeping with the other 4 name changes that was done in the other areas of Trinidad and Tobago. So that is something that happened in the last 7 days.
Expenses and so on, outside of
on Sunday the 14th, last Sunday, 7 of the families of the 7 babies who died in that over the past few days has given notice that they will be suing the state. And that happened on Sunday the 14th. Monday the 15th, at our UNC Monday night meeting, Dr. Munilal raised the issue about the Prime Minister's Rowley $10 million international travel bill and the different countries that he would have visited. Now that raised a hue and a cry, because at one stage Dr. Rowley said he was not responding to Dr. Munilal. And then on Thursday, we saw a press conference being held by Dr. Rowley, Prime Minister, and he spent most of his time addressing his foreign travel and the cost that he incurred on those foreign travels on Thursday. And that was held on Thursday by a press conference. And coming out of that press conference, there are several markers that came out of that press conference, which I'll get into. But it's interesting, and after he defended his $10 million travel bill, he said, come early May, he'll be traveling again to Ghana and then to India on another foreign trip after defending that $10 million travel bill. On Wednesday, it is interesting, on Wednesday last week, what came out of the U.S. government was where they issued OFAC, Office of Foreign Assets Control Department, where they talked about they will be winding down and imposing further imposing sanctions on the Venezuelan government in the oil and gas sector. And I'll get more into that. On Thursday last week, at the Joint Select Committee, on Wednesday the Joint Select Committee was held. And coming out of that Joint Select Committee in the Public Accounts Committee, where the chairman was our Senator Wade Mark, it was interesting that the chairman Newman George, on behalf of that Guaracara refinery company and the Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Company, Chairman George mentioned, and it came out in the media, that the preservation of mothballing the Pointe-à-Pierre refinery has costed this government and you, the taxpayers, of over $500,000 per month. And I will elaborate on that figure of $500,000 per month that Chairman Newman George had mentioned was being the cost incurred to preserve and mothball the Pointe-à-Pierre refinery. Also, in the media last week is something that I think most of us would have missed. That the Auditor General, when she laid her report in Parliament, it talked about a $1.2 billion being paid late to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. That was an article in one of the dailies. I think a lot of the media might have missed that, but it talked about the late payment of injecting funds into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund based on the formula of oil revenues in our country. And that is something that we will come to at another date. But I just want to stick a pin on that to mark that this morning. So Trinidad and Tobago, 14 days ago, I was right here at a press conference on a Sunday. And we presented the facts on the vulnerability, the catastrophe, and the broken state of affairs that has plagued our energy sector. On April 7th, we demonstrated to you how every single metric from gas production, oil production, drilling, energy sector employment, and energy sector growth was at an all-time low under this government. 14 days later, we are here again as great danger is on the horizon for this country's energy sector. 14 days later, we are forced to come to you again, not for politicking, but for your own national interest to highlight yet another crisis knocking on the door of our energy sector. Trinidad and Tobago, that is how brittle, how fragile and disintegrated your energy sector has become under this present government. That is the space of 14 days, more danger is on the horizon. In the space of 2 weeks, the dragon gas, which this government has pinned its country's economic hopes on, have come into question. In the last 2 weeks, we have learned that the refinery, which belongs to you and was promised to the OWTU, is being considered by 8 entities. In the last 2 weeks, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, expects natural gas prices to remain 65% lower than 2022 and 10% lower than 2023. All of these issues require accountability because they have a direct impact on the lives of the citizens. Who is telling the truth in this drug and gas deal? And we have heard the Prime Minister and Minister Young last week, like one hand didn't know what the left hand didn't know the right hand. And this morning we're going to ask some questions. So this morning, on behalf of the taxpayers, we want to know who is really telling the truth on the status and impacts of this drug and gas deal to the recent reinstatement of U.S. sanctions on the Venezuelan oil and gas industry. Should we believe the Prime Minister or should we believe the Minister of Energy? Because in the last week, they have publicly given two clearly different positions. As this country called for clarity on the way forward, with this announcement, the Ministry of Energy has reported on Newsday, on Thursday, that the OFAC statement, no threat to the drug and gas deal. So let me just highlight what I mean. On Thursday, Minister Young was in the newspapers saying sanctions on Venezuela will not affect Trinidad and Tobago. That was a statement put out by the Ministry of Energy and also confirmed by the Minister of Energy, Minister Young, in his statement also. All right, so that when that statement of the OFAC, the license came out on Wednesday, the Ministry of Energy and Minister Young ran out and said these sanctions will not affect Venezuela. But what we saw, and there's another article that says no impact on drug and gas. All right, and then what we saw coming out from the Prime Minister's press conference was a contradiction in our view of what Minister Young said. All right. So I think there's a slide on the video on the screen that shows the contradiction that has taken place. All right. So again, Minister Young says it has no impact, and Prime Minister says the geopolitical issues could have some implications on the entire drug and gas deal. So when the Prime Minister spoke on Thursday, we were told an entirely different position. The Prime Minister told us, and I want to quote, "We are not immune to what goes on between Venezuela and the United States, because as we say that, too is a moving target." This is his quote. What we have done is to try and build relationships and promote our interests in a wider sphere than in Port of Spain, so that whatever happens or whatever is happening or is to happen with Washington and Caracas, we have resolutely kept our interests in front of all parties. So on Wednesday, I repeat, the Minister of Energy tells us in essence not to worry, because as they state, the Minister of Energy advises that they work to explore and produce and export natural gas from this field to Trinidad and Tobago, meaning the drug and gas field, is continuing. Those are his words, is continuing. But on Thursday, the Prime Minister tells us we are not immune to geopolitical interference. That is why on Friday in the opposition, and Friday in Parliament, the opposition went to Parliament to get a status update. I went to Parliament to ask certain questions on this drug and gas deal because the stories were not adding up. Trinidad and Tobago, the answers we got would shock you. For the past year, they have been talking about the drug and gas coming. On Friday, we called on the Prime Minister's question time to tell us what infrastructural work has been done to extract this gas from the drug and gas field. Because you remember, Minister Young has always been boasting about a 2-year license that was triggered back in October 2023. We are in April 2024, and that license expires next year, 2025 October. Do you know that no physical or infrastructural work has been done on the Dragon field as yet? Listen to yourself as I ask my colleague to play the question that I asked on Friday in Parliament.
Advanced audible and virtual emergency alarm systems for quick ID of health
Second question to the
emergencies.
Prime Minister.
This
Will the
is
Prime
just a
Minister
short listing
specifically
of
state
equipment
what
provided to the
infrastructural
Children's
development has
Hospital?
been done
It
to
does
date
not include
to
all
explore
the
and
surgical
produce
and
natural
plant
gas
equipment
from the
and
Dragon field?
concentrated more
Prime
on that
Minister.
affecting the issue that is with us.
Madam Speaker,
The above medical equipment list is available at the hospital, and it consists
since
of major
obtaining the
and minor
30-year
life-saving
exploration
equipment.
and production
It
license
should be noted that the death due to
for
an
the
illness
exploration
is
and
a
production
possibility
of
and can
natural
always
gas
happen.
from
But
Venezuela
they can
to
also be
Trinidad and
prevented,
Tobago
and the risk
the
can be
21st of
minimized
December
if we have the right
2023.
medical and
The
diagnostic
National Gas
equipment,
Company and
and that is
Shell
provided to trained
have been
clinicians
working
and
on the
medical staff.
elements necessary
That
to
hospital
get
was
the
designed
project
and built
done.
with patient care as its
These
priority.
operations usually had
This can be seen
long
in the
lead
design
time
of the
and
wards,
gestation
with patient
periods.
and clinical flow
For
areas
example,
clearly marked as clean
the
corridors
procurement of
and
survey
dirty
vessels to
corridors.
survey the
There's
field,
also access to hygiene
the
stations
planning of
throughout
well
the
work,
wards. This was
engineering
done for
designs,
infection control
costings
and
and
to
other
minimize
necessary work
contamination
for
from
the
within
project
and
going
outside the
on.
wards to protect
all
patients,
the necessary
but to
activities
protect the healthcare
are
staff
underway
and the
as
general
the
public at
precursors
all times.
to any physical
The advanced
activity
audible and
which may
visual
take place
emergency
on the
alarm
field.
systems for quick identification of health emergencies,
Point of
which is
view.
Thank you,
integrated from
Madam
the
Speaker.
ward
The
to the
follow-up
nurses
question, Prime
station,
Minister.
was
Given that
designed to
Shell
allow clinical
is
staff
asking for an
to
extension of the
quickly
OFAC
identify and
license,
respond
which
to
you had
patient
mentioned,
emergencies
before
on
it
the
makes a
wards,
final investment
enabling that
decision to
staff
begin
to give
infrastructural development
life-saving
of the
care.
Dragon field,
This
could
system
the
is
Prime
available
Minister
in
state
all
if he's
wards,
confident
including the
that the U.S.
NICU
government will
unit.
extend the
It
OFAC
should be noted
license
that
to
the
allow
medical
Shell
equipment
to
in that
invest in this
hospital
project?
Honourable Member.
Children's
Having
Hospital
regard to
in
the
NICU
original
and the
question
pediatric
asked,
tower
the
was
answer
fit
given,
for
and the
purpose.
standing orders, this question is off.
Examples of this are vital sign monitors with
Thank you,
integrated neonatal
and I'm back.
pediatric
You would have listened to the question I
neonatal
posed,
pediatric
the response from the Prime
with
Minister.
built-in
I had
safety
asked a
parameter
supplemental question
Did we have those
about the
reports
foreign
in the
investment part.
Well-mounted
It was
diagnostic
denied
sets with
in
neonatal
Parliament.
and pediatric
So now
pieces,
Trinidad and Tobago, we understand
neonatal
field appraisal
cuffs,
and
syringe
field development
pumps,
takes time in the life
integrated
cycle
neonatal pediatric
of a gas
parameters.
field. But the
Crash
Dragon
pads
field is no
outfitted with
ordinary
specialized
project.
PET tubes
It is a
for
project where the
neonatal and
investors want some
pediatric
certainty before they go forward.
Resuscitation
It is a
units
project
for
where
neonatal
Shell's
child and
investor,
infant,
company
face
Shell,
guards
wants
to
some
deliver
certainty
life-saving
before
care.
they go forward.
O2 sensors
2 weeks
sent
ago,
to neonatal and
even before the
pediatric-
United States reimposed sanctions on Venezuela, Shell, according to Reuters report, was seeking a long-term license from the United States before making a final investment decision on the Dragon natural gas project in Venezuela. Shell was literally asking for a 15-year license before they made that investment. What that means is before Shell's investors approved the hundreds of millions of United States dollars, US dollars, needed to actually begin work to produce gas, they want a longer license beyond the 2 years, that was granted to Trinidad and Tobago. We raised this with you on April 7th, 2 weeks ago. We raised that, and we raised on April 7th. We called on the Minister of Energy to give some clarity and certainty that the Dragon deal was on strong footing with what was called an ask of Shell for a 15-year license. On April 7, 2 weeks ago, we highlighted how Minister Young had suddenly changed his tune from boasting about the stability of this 2-year license to now responding to Shell's position, and I quote, by saying, this is Minister Young's quote, obviously, a 2-year license has a window, meaning it's very short and tight, and this is a transaction that will take more than 2 years. So even Minister Young is admitting that the 2-year license that Trinidad and Tobago got, that they have presently, is not enough time to conclude, or even, I would say, even start to find gas in that Dragon deal. Why did we raise this then? We wanted to show the population and the country that behind all the drug and gas coming, boast of this government, there were significant hurdles to cross. 2 weeks later, we have entered even rockier territory because these U.S. sanctions will not instill confidence in Shell investors and their shareholders.
I want to share with you, I hold in my hands something that we had used at that hospital. All the children who came were given one of these, a little teddy, dressed as a doctor. We handed it out to all the children there, and they were so happy. Now we have replaced this with something else. At that opening ceremony in 2015, I remember the smiling faces of those children, their joy, their hope, and their light. Today, as I hold this teddy up and bear it up, I think about the fact that just a decade ago, that hospital represented and this study represented the hope and future of our children. Now today, under this Rowley regime of terror, the government from hell, teddy bears are now transformed, sadly to say, into the corpses of newborn babes. Teddy bears have been transformed. I don't think we can even imagine what it is like, what has happened to these mothers. I read one article where the mother was saying, they spend time fixing up the place. They fix up, it's a one-room house, they have a 5-room. They will fix up the little nursery. They'll buy the little teddy bear. They'll have it there. Can you imagine their pain today when they have lost their children under this wicked government? I recall hearing us saying a long time ago, every time a child is born, it gives us hope that God has not yet given up on mankind. Every time a child is born, it gives us hope that God has not given up on mankind. Today I say under this government, the Rowley government, even the hope of the living is being destroyed and replaced with death and despair. How much more can our country take? I say it is time for citizens to take a stand against them before we plummet forever into the pits of hell. It is time for the Rowley government to be fired. I thank you all very much, and we'll be happy to take any of your questions. Okay. Well, that's nice.
Have you been in contact with the affected parties?
Not personally, but we have had persons reaching out, and of course our lawyers are working with the various families to take forward whatever actions may be needed. Yes, through our lawyers, definitely, we've reached out. I can do that. I can.
The reason why I ask is because the families can be referred to counseling through the medical social department units.
Yes.
So I wanted to find out if you've heard whether that has not been working for them, which is why you're renewing a call.
I am certainly renewing that call. I think they need very intensive counseling, and that is the duty of the government. Through wherever we can get it. Tim and Dr. Bodo can probably guide us on which unit or where, but the fact is they should get that counseling. Okay, very intensive counseling on top of that.
Well, we've been given some sort of assurance from the NWRHA that they've gone through the necessary sanitization methods and so forth to have the NICU reopen. Do you think at this point the NICU should be shut down, at least until the probe is finished?
I cannot say whether they should close them, but I don't trust this government, and I don't trust their operatives. So even though they've told us they've done the sanitation, why didn't they, when 1 died, 2 died, 3 died, why didn't you do something? Until you reach number 11, and who knows how many more. I don't trust them. I do not trust them. And we call for these reports to be made public. So one thing yes, we've done everything. I don't believe them. Those things should have happened even before the 2nd and 3rd and the 4th died. So I do not believe them. I don't trust them. I think they need to do something further. It's not that they've cleaned up there. It's just open that hospital, everything to deal with the neonates and the children, every single thing is there. Just open it.
What has happened to that equipment? I saw answers from the health minister while you were having your press conference.
Yeah.
But, I was referred to the NCRH.
You could give this to. I'm sorry?
I'm asking if you have any idea what has happened to that equipment from the hospital.
Well, it's locked down. We can't see it. I don't know what has happened. I don't know what has happened. I am not aware that any effort has been made to empty that hospital or to remove the equipment. I pray God that that equipment is still there so we can open that hospital. Multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment in that hospital. So it's really sad, Gil. It's really sad.
You press the point of your distrust in the government and their handling of this entire situation, but what about the move to have PAHU investigate this matter privately? Do you have faith in that?
I totally agree that power should be brought in. I said it earlier when I spoke. Yes, the answer is yes. I do believe it should become involved. So we will have world standards in what is happening. What I'm saying is we should not await power to do the probe because that takes time for all the protocols to be established.
And my other question has to do with the compensation. Well, the matter is heading to court, so there's not much we can see in that regard.
Sure.
But what do you think is the most fitting compensation for these families at this point in time?
Again, our lawyers will determine that. If you talk about monetary compensation, so I call for counseling and monetary. Our lawyers will work on determining, not just waiting to get to courthouse. I'm calling for the government to consider it now in terms of helping these suffering families. So our lawyers, again, are working with the families to see how best they can be assisted.
And after this probe by PAHU, what do you hope will come out of it? Because, I mean...
Nothing good will come out of it. 11 babies have already died. And on the converse, something good may come out of it, that we may be able to put in the protocols and the recommendations to prevent a tragedy like this happening again. You know, this happened in 2018 already, you know, under the same Minister of Health. In 2018, there were several babies who died, neonates who died, several. And they didn't learn from that experience, and here we are back again. So maybe out of the probe, you know, the recommendations being made. I gave some of my own here based on, of these two experienced doctors, I gave some of my own suggestions that what could have been done, what could be done. And of course, the probe and recommendations, we'll get some more from out of it.
He asked for recommendations, but we're prepared to give the recommendations. He's prepared to accept them.
Yeah. Oh, they both reminded me, in 2013, we had prepared a manual since 2013. But this government, you know, out of spite and malice, anything that came from my government, they throw it aside or they don't open it. So this is still there. And I've given you a few recommendations and certain things I said today. So there is this Minister of Health report that was prepared under my government in 2013. May 2013, we have this. Okay? Okay, thank you.
So yesterday, the NWRHA revealed that the head of their infection...
Step in the right direction, more heads have to roll. More heads have to roll. It is a step in the right direction. And then you know what happens. We are a 7-day wonder country. So they send off this man on leave, and when you blink and you fall asleep, by the next morning he's back on the job, and everybody has forgotten. So it is a step. I mentioned the board as well. You know, they should look at that board was hand appointed, hand picked. And do you want to move on to another topic, or you want to stay on this one?
I actually have questions for other topics as well.
On this or others?
Others.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So the incumbent police commissioner's tenure is coming to an end. Do you support her reappointment?
The answer is no. I think not. I think the performance has been abysmal and tremendous failure. We are at some of the highest crime rates we've ever seen in our country happening. So I don't agree, but there is a bill that is going to be debated shortly, or Parliament has started. There is a bill where the government is attempting to say that if we have to put a commissioner of police to act, then the government will not come to Parliament to get the approval of Parliament. It is a special majority bill, and the opposition, we have already decided in our caucus on, when was it? Wednesday, we will not support that. They need our votes, but we will not support it. The reason that came into the law in 2006, that provision, that even an acting appointment must come to the Parliament for approval. Okay? There's a reason. It is for transparency. It is for accountability. Because what was happening then in 2006, I worked on that piece of law. I was a part of the panel team, and Mr. Manning had a team, and we worked on that 2006 piece of legislation, so I'm very familiar with the background. First of all, you were getting positions where people were acting in positions for long. So before we put that you must come to the Parliament, people put acting, you didn't know it maybe a week after you find out who is acting or not acting. And then they end up supposed to act for 6 days. They're saying a man or a woman going off on leave, and they should just act for a few days Before you check it out, there's a year past, 2 years past, and you're still acting. Some great actors we had in those days. So we put in this piece of law to say you must get parliamentary approval. That's one part of it. I'm saying long-acting person staying there for very long. But the other one is transparency and accountability. They could then choose anybody, any officer. There are 3 things in this piece of amendment they brought. That's one of it, to remove this accountability to Parliament. Another part of it, they're saying the law already has that the senior officer, the most senior officer, will be the one to act. They've removed that point. So you could take junior PC, whatever he is, and put them to act as a commissioner, WPC, to act as a commissioner of police or a deputy commissioner of police. So we can't agree to that. And the transparency and accountability, they could pick up somebody like a person who was involved in the abduction of a man named Brent Thomas, a citizen, our citizen, abducted him. He was in a hotel room in Barbados. And he was there to go and get cardiac, medical heart checkup. They grabbed this man in the middle of the night, pushed him in the back of a van, rustled up a plane, drop him in the plane and bring him home. And there was nothing against the man. There was nothing for that to happen. So the one officer who was recently promoted to DCP, if we don't do this parliamentary process, they could pick up that person and put them to become the acting commissioner of police. Tying it back to your point that the commissioner's term is coming to an end. And they want to put someone to act. So we cannot say yes to that piece of amendment. And no, I said no, I don't agree that the person should be given back. Now, their problem is they don't like Parliament and they don't like transparency and accountability. And they said, oh, so every time if a man falls sick for 2 days, you had to come for an acting appointment. Oh, and we had to come back next week because Kevin going abroad, so he's taking over. Every time. So what's wrong? What's wrong with that? Come to Parliament. You have every day of the week to bring it to Parliament, have the accountability, the transparency, and be ensured that somebody is not acting there for the next 5 years, and we don't know. Do it. So their excuse is, look, hey, we can't come every time when somebody falls ill. Yes, you can. That is the law, and we will keep that piece of law on our statute books. Yeah, if we have to go out on Saturday to do the or Sunday for transparency with respect to giving an acting commissioner or acting deputy. So on that issue, we are very, very strong, very strong.
Do you have your eyes on any particular person or persons who may be fitting for that role?
I don't. I really don't. That's why we needed to come to Parliament. The Police Service Commission prepares a merit list. And you know what happened with that? The man went and grabbed the merit list from the president. I mean, how much more can they corrupt a democracy and interfere with independent institutions? You find yourself a president or at the same time Blissy Prasad there to grab back that list to prevent someone whom the PSC had recommended, bringing it to Parliament to get approval. I don't know what else you want to ask him, but there's something else I would like to say on a matter raised by the Prime Minister yesterday. So I don't know if you want to ask me anything about that.
Well, on the news of the Prime Minister and on the news of Prime as well, I want to find out if the opposition is going to make another attempt to meet with the government on the crime situation. What is going on?
I think the days for that was past. I have no faith, no trust, confidence, no trust or time. I remember Mr. Rowley coming to the end of our term and he said, we will isolate the opposition. We will not cooperate with the opposition. That's what he said. Well, today I say the same. We will not depend on them. Been there, done that. Not again.
Final question on the party's internal situation. Are you confident heading into general election with not only your role as the political leader, but the cohesiveness of your party? Because we're seeing this widening gap among your members, your MPs, and so
I wouldn't call it widening, by the way. I wouldn't use that word, but you're seeing persons who are expressing different views. Look, ma'am, those are internal party matters, and they'll be dealt with internally by the party. Have I started to do what?
Have you started to address those matters internally?
The party has a constitution. We always act in accordance with the party's constitution. The arms of the party are functioning. We had a NATEX meeting on Wednesday and other parliamentary caucuses and so on. Party will deal with internal matters. And if you tell me that, I wonder if you recall a lady by the name of Karen Teixeira, Nunes. You remember she took Mr. Rowley to court because of internal elections, So it's not the first time in political parties you have these things happening. It will not be the last time. And we will act in accordance with the constitution of our party and the democracy in our party. Those matters will be dealt with sooner than later. Am I concerned about going into the election because a few persons express a different view? And the last time I checked, we are still a democratic republic, and everybody has freedom of speech. It is only when we became defamatory or they start to defame you, then you worry and take them to court. But there's freedom of speech, and they're free to voice their opinions as others are voicing different opinions from them. So I'm not worried. I say I've seen it in every political party over Dr. Megu is a political whatever. Political analyst, political historian, yes. It happens all the time. I don't think we are worried at all about that, but we will do what we have to do in terms of abiding with our party's constitution. Is that all? Anything? Well, I want to make a further statement. I think it's important. I hadn't planned to do it because I've already spoken for so long, but I think it's a very important point. Yesterday, the Prime Minister talked about his travels, and of course, usual blame game, blame Kamala, blame the partnership, blame all of us, and who traveled more and who traveled. That's not the issue. What he tried to justify his travels is with an imaginary $17, $18 billion. He said because of his travels, $17 or $18 billion came back to this country. Really, Mr. Rowley? Really? Because of those travels? When you went up to Houston, what happened with the gas price that you negotiated? What happened? Shut down so many plants in our country. Seven. So this imaginary 16, 17 billion. So why then did you just earlier this year borrow $10 million? Come to Parliament to borrow 10 if you bring home 17 billion. You hear that lie? That is a lie. This is an imaginary number he pulled out of a hat that his travels brought him 17 billion. Let me ask him this. Is our country broke? Have we run out of money, Mr. Rowley? Or Dr. Rowley, have we run? Is the country broke? Is that why government cannot pay its bills owed to suppliers, contractors, and VAT refunds and so on? Now, the government for this fiscal year, budgeted fiscal year 2024, they pegged natural gas prices at US $5 per MMBTU. That's very important because they have no other revenue stream. No other revenue stream. So the only revenue they're getting is from the energy sector. They said we are going to get it at $5 US per MMBTU. What's the reality? What is the truth? From that budget, October 2023, $2.98 was the price. What did they peg it at? $5 US. They're getting $2.98. November 2023, $2.71. December 23, $2.52. Anything reaching near to $5? No. January 24, $3.18. February 24, $1.72. March 24, $1.49. And we come to April, currently averaging between $1.60 and $1.80. Nowhere anywhere near to the $5 that they peg their hat, to hang their hat up onto $5. So the average price of the gas between October budget and now is US $2.40, less than half of the budgeted figure of $5. And let's move along with that. Less than half that was projected. When we put this and couple it together with decline in production, I guarantee that the government will in no way meet their target for revenue. Oil production is also at a historical low, comparable way back to 1939 levels. This is their one source of revenue, down to 1939. The natural gas prices for the rest of 24, as I say, is projected to be US $2.20, and for next year 25 to average US $2.90, nowhere near to this $5. So these were prices for the coldest months of the year in the northern hemisphere. We are now entering hot summer months in the US and Europe, so prices will further drop. They don't need it as much. I say warning to all suppliers of goods and services to the government, to contractors, to persons waiting on VAT refunds and wage settlements. Be very careful with how you are spending your money. This government is broke. They are refinancing and borrowing at high rates. Every time you come to the parliament to increase the borrowing ceiling and the amounts and so on. Because of their mismanagement and failed energy negotiations, government cannot pay its debts. This is why they are forcing through the property tax. utility rate increases, fuel price increases, and so on. So there is no imaginary 17 or 18 billion dollars that Rowley is speaking about. We have not seen this money in any of our budget statements. What we see is negative foreign direct investment. Since 2015, we have seen GDP down by 20% since 2015. We've seen a reduction in foreign reserves when we were there from US $11.5 billion. Where is it now? US 5.5. 5.5. Everything has fallen. Everything has dropped. And you want to tell me you bring this imaginary $17 billion. That's not true, Mr. Rowley. I'm very sorry. And if you did, come and show me where. Put it in the estimates of revenue and expenditure and show us where this came, because it's not there in any. What's based on our project. FDI, foreign direct investment, has plummeted. You know what? In our report, it's reported that it is now minus. Where we had billions coming in from foreign direct investment like Mitsubishi and whoever else, we now have what? Minus. In other words, the opposite is happening, is negative. There's capital flight, is fleeing the country. They're not coming here. So where this imaginary 17 and 18 billion coming from? Nowhere. We're having PNM affiliated people coming to us asking for help because they're not getting paid by the government. A lot of people are not being paid. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance must come clean and tell the country what is the current revenue earned for fiscal 24 compared to what was projected from the energy sector. The country is broke, I'm telling you that. I am calling all citizens, be very judicious with your spending. The little that you have, you need that to save some of it for something. I am putting country on notice. The government does not have the money to pay you if you supply goods and services. Get your money up front. Don't let them say, I'll pay you down the road, because they're still owing. So many contractors are being owed and suppliers. Don't be fooled. How can we fix this? How can you fix the revenue streams? The Rowley government has to go. They have to go, and we can fix it. We can decrease crime to encourage more investment locally. We can work with the foreign multinationals to incentivize investment in the energy sector. We can reintroduce the original procurement regulations, which the PNM and independent centers gutted, whereby we could save between $2 and $7 billion annually that goes into corruption. But they watered down, they gutted that procurement law, and the procurement regulator told this country we lose between $2 and $7 billion each year from corruption. We can also deregulate the banking sector. Too many onerous requirements in the banking industry. You cannot even open an account easily. And recently we had cause to change, to add a name to our account. And that has taken us about 6 months just to add a signatory to an account. Too many onerous requirements. Again, tying up businesses and the ease of doing business. Yeah, damaging the ease of doing business. So I say, even to transfer your own money, you want to make payments, you want to access a loan, the requirements are overbearing and stifling. I warned the country that this would happen in previous debates regarding financial bills in Parliament. Many of the same people complaining now were the same ones who supported the PNM to push through these very, very anti-business bills in the Parliament. So again, Mr. Rowley, show us where the 17, 18 imaginary billion dollars that you've brought back to this country, where it come from. Show us where it is. Because if you had done that, you didn't have to borrow year after year. The borrowings in the Parliament and extending those rates up. Any others? No, poor you. You get all the questions today. Or lucky you, maybe. Okay. But the others are listening, and I'm sure they will take your questions and deal with them. Is there anything else anybody else wants to raise? I want to thank you for your time, and have a very blessed, safe day. Thank you.
just can't live without you. No, nowhere. Now many men will try to tell you bad things about me. Oh baby, let them try. I know one day their lust will die, and there will be no cause or reason for you to doubt me. 'Cause what I feel is real. The love that I have is your signed and sealed. Now I'm building my whole wide world around you. But baby, here's my request from you. Baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. Please don't take my sweetness for weakness. No, baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, baby. 'Cause our future depends on you, and no one else will do. And every breath I take, I'll take another one for you. Because I want you in my life now, baby. And every song I sing, I'll be singing with feelings about you. With feelings of love so pure and true. There is no way I can live my life without you, baby. But this I desire from you. Baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, don't take my sweetness for weakness. Please don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, baby. 'Cause everything depends on you, and no one else will do. No, 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 baby. I'll do almost anything you ask me to. Always willing to set aside the tribulations you put me through. And people will criticize that you and me, they don't think that is wise. And everything that I do, they are willing and able to publicize. I got all bets on you, waiting to finally receive my prize. No matter how men rule, our future is growing inside of you. Baby, time is the master. With your blessings we will prosper. I am placing all bets on you. But baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. Now baby, don't take my sweetness for weakness. Please don't take my kindness for weakness. Baby, don't take my sweetness for weakness. No, baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. No, baby, don't take my sweetness for weakness. No, baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, baby. 'Cause our future depends on you, and no one else will do. Ooh. And every breath I take, I'll take another one for you. Because I want you in my life now, baby. And every song I sing, I'll be singing with feelings about you. With feelings of love so pure and true. There is no way I can live my life without you, baby. But this I desire from you. Baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, don't take my sweetness for weakness. Please don't take my kindness for weakness. No, no, baby. 'Cause everything depends on you. matter how men rule, our future is growing inside of you. Baby, time is the master. With your blessings we will prosper. I am placing all bets on you. But baby, don't take my kindness for weakness. Now baby, don't take my sweetness for weakness.